All right, there we go. All right, so we're going to start with "Will this darkness ever end?" We're going to Psalms 88. Verse 11 says, "Shall thy loving kindness be declared in the grave, or thy faithfulness in destruction? Shall thy wonders be known in the dark, and thy righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? But unto thee I have cried, O Lord, and in the morning shall my prayer prevent thee. Lord, why castest thou out of my soul? Why hidest thou face from me? I am afflicted and ready to die from my youth up. While I suffer thy terrors, I am distracted." All right. So in verse 11, we'll give a quick overview of what's going on for those who don't know. Psalms 88 was written by my guy Heman. Heman was a chief musician under David. He played all instruments. He was actually used as one of the praise and worship leaders that actually presented the Ark of Covenant into the city. They marched in when they sung and they was dancing and praising God for the Ark of Covenant. He was one of the praise and worship leaders that David himself appointed. And so Heman was an Israelite. He praised God. He loved God. He worshiped God. But we're meeting him in a time, to give you the context, we're meeting him in a time where he was actually taken in captivity along with the Israelites by the Babylonians. Israel had this bad, annoying habit of always disappointing God. It was always on God's um, good side, and they did some, jumped on this bad side. That was Israel's life. I mean, either they was in it or they wasn't. And this particular time, we find that Israel messes up again. Man, they just can't stay out of trouble. And what happens here is that now we find Haman in a dark place, physically, mentally, emotionally. He's in a dark place. He's alone. He's isolated. He's secluded, and he is crying out in this psalm. And it's actually noted as one of the most depressing psalms ever written in the Bible. And so in verse 11, when he mentions love and kindness, when Heman is actually talking about, he's actually telling God that dead man cannot appreciate the attributes of God. And so he's in a place where he feels like he's dying. He feels like he's dead. He's like, God, listen, if you kill me, if you let me die, who's going to praise you? If you let me pass away, who's going to worship you? I can't do this from the grave. I need to do this while I'm alive. Lord, don't let me die. This is what's going on in verse 11. And when we look at verse 12, he says, he mentions the land of forgetfulness, the land of forgiveness. So this is not really a physical land that Heman is talking about. It is a metaphor for what he's mentioning. He's talking about a land of oblivion where the dead man neither remember nor are remembered. Because we got to remember in this day and time, Jesus has not come yet. And so in this time, when you die, you just die. You just die. It was Jesus wasn't here yet. Jesus has not ascended yet. So he hasn't descended yet from heaven. And so what Heman is alluding to, he's alluding to the fact that God, if you let me die, if you let me pass away, then how can I help people remember you? And how can I be remembered as a praise and worshiper? Please don't let me die. He's crying out from captivity. He's crying out from isolation. He's crying out from exile. That, all right, God, listen, if I pass away right now, who's going to be there to back you up? Who's going to be there to back me up? All right. And then when we look at verse 13, it says, "But unto thee I have cried, O Lord, and in the morning shall my prayer prevent thee." And so what he's talking about when he says, "I have cried," when he mentions that, "I have cried." In the beginning of the psalm, in Psalm 88, verse 1, he says, "All day and night, God, I have been crying." And so we find him still in the place of 13, in a place of vulnerability, where he's saying, "God, I'm still crying and you still not answering me. What's going on?" And what this alludes to the fact that in your prayer life, prayer is actually a conversation. It's a conversation with God. And in these times, they took their prayer life very serious. And so when you read Psalms and you read particular prayers, I want you to know that when these authors are crying out, when they are mentioning God, and when they're talking to God like this, they're actually also talking from a perspective of not being answered. Because in these days, as today, we still should, they expected God to answer them. And so he's reached all the way to verse 13. So imagine you've been praying and crying all day and all night. You writing about it, you writing about your prayer, you're writing your prayer down, and then 30 minutes go by, or an hour go by, or hours go by, or days go by, and God still hasn't answered you. This is how he feels at this point. And this is when he basically saying if he comes back to the reality that he's not in the grave, but he's still living, and while he feels on the edge of the grave, he's going to continue to keep crying out until God rescues him. This is the place that he's in, that he feels as though I'm going to keep crying out. God, I believe you can rescue me, but why haven't you done so? What is going on, God? Why are you leaving me hanging? Why are you leaving me hanging? And as we jump to the last two verses before I jump into another part, in verse 14, when it says, Lord, why castest thou out of my soul? Why hidest thou face from me? He's talking from a place of he can't fathom why he's suffering. He cannot deal with why he's suffering. He's still questioning why is he suffering. He's literally wondering why is he suffering. And then in verse 15, he even alludes to the point that he has been suffering since he was young. Um, and this is the point, when it says the point of distraction, what it actually means is exhaustion. So it's not that he's distracted, that something else has his attention from God. What he's actually saying is that he's exhausted. He's saying, it says, I am afflicted and I'm ready to die from my youth up. While I suffer thy terrors, I am distracted. And so what Heman is saying here, basically, why me? God, I've been suffering for you since I was a kid. Now I'm in captivity, back and forth out of captivity. Now I'm in a place where I feel as though I can no longer survive. I can't make it. God, I'm really struggling with this. Where are you? And so the first question I want to throw out there to the group is, are you still haunted by anything in your childhood that you have asked God, honestly, where are you? Is there anything that's going on in your life where you ever had to ask God, you know what, where are you?
Raven said definitely Landle. People using the chat. It ain't just crickets.
No. I'm trying to read. Let's see. Okay. All right. So with your childhood, why do you think God has not removed this from you? Why do you think God has left you in this place? You can throw it in the chat, that's fine. Why do you think that God, you don't have to mention what it exactly is. I don't believe in people having to put their business out there. But why do you think God hasn't removed this particular thing from you? And then we're gonna use that to go deeper. Why do you think God hasn't removed this from you?
I think for me personally, it's like a process, and I'm in the process right
Mm,
now. So it's not necessarily for this example that is something that he's not going to remove or not going to remedy, but it's just taking time.
mm. That's good. The process. It's a process. That's good. That's good. Anybody else? What is something that still haunts you by your childhood?
My bad. I had to step away from my computer. For me, I think, haunts me from my childhood. I'm an only child, so there are probably tons of things that haunt me from my childhood. But I just think not carrying my parents' cross, so like, their mistakes don't define me, and even the things that I've seen or been through in my own house. And when I don't really have anybody to turn to, or I think just not being so hard on myself. And I think God hasn't released me for that. Well, because I had to learn, I had to learn that. I had to learn that, my parents' cross isn't mine. My journey is my own, even though these are the people who raised me and I still live with, and see every day. So.
Yeah, that's a big one, especially you mentioned being an only child. So it's like I got certain situations that others who have siblings won't understand. So that definitely can be yeah, that definitely be rough. Um, Somebody mentioned the process. The process is very important. So Jay Money, when we take a closer look at this, what do you see, Jay? What do you see?
I'm on mute. I'm so stupid. I wish Nene was on a call so she could see what I really want to say. But I see, growth. I see true. I see change. Or you can look at the makeup on the one on the far left, and you see how far we've come just from a physical standpoint. As she grew up, she got taller. She got older, got smarter. You can see the growth in the ministry too, just through the clips. The one on the left, you could tell she was a kid just starting. On the right, you see she got that grit, that energy, that facial. And in the middle, she's a little bit more mature, more polished. So I see progress is what I see.
Mm, mm. I love what Dee said. She said, honestly, I'm not sure why it still haunts me, haunts my childhood, maybe to keep me grounded or humble, being able to look back in the process. And that's actually, man, Dee, man, that's deep, because that actually ties into what's going on here. So for those who don't know, I do mime, I do teach mime. Everybody on here really know that. And I've been teaching mime for about 13 years. And when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing. But as I started taking workshops and taking classes, I started learning more about it. Now I teach it myself and do workshops and all that myself. Um, and around in the first picture, I remember we had to do it really for the first time. And as young kids, they were struggling. They were struggling to really um, tap into the emotion that was needed because in mime you have to tell a story. And so the song that we're doing in that picture is More Than I Can Bear. And so it's by Kurt Franklin. And so because the emotion of the song, I was trying to teach the young kids how to really tap into it, how to draw into it. And it was so interesting. What happened around this time was my uncle had passed away. Well, our uncle had passed away. And so Nene was struggling. I said, listen, Nene, use that emotion and put it in the song. Take that moment and put it in the song. And when we did that, even some of the leaders that was over us was like, man, y'all really was like locked in, or y'all facials was awesome. But the truth was we was really emotional, that we was really in a crying state. We was really in a vulnerable state. And then from that moment, we learned how to use that emotion and keep that same energy and just increase it as we move forward. And so we get to the middle picture, we're doing Thank You by Richard Smallwood. Then we get to the bottom right, we're doing Better by Ty Tribbett. And like Jordan said, the makeup get better, the wardrobe changes. But one thing that remained constant was that raw emotion. Was that raw emotion? One thing that remained since she was young was that raw emotion. And so it is a process. It is a process, but a part of God not taking it away is for not just for you to reflect on, but for you to share your story with somebody else. So that so that although you may be still experiencing these things, and although it feels like a burden, it feels heavy on you, what happens is when you able to share this with somebody else, your story remains authentic because you can still feel the emotion. And so with the pictures right here, no matter how many times I call my little sister and say, hey, I want you to come back and do something with me, she can still reflect back to that emotion because although my uncle is gone and we love him and all that, she can still feel that raw emotion because that emotion still remains authentic. And so sometimes God doesn't remove it so that when you share the story keeps its authenticity. So when Heman wrote this psalm, when it's placed into the scripture, when you go back and you read it, I forgot what I think Nina said it in week 1 when Nina was like, "This is dark." it kept its authenticity because Heman stayed in that dark. He stayed with that emotion that he had since he was young. God didn't remove it. So now that in 2021, when we read this, we can reflect on it and say, yo, this man was really going through something because that raw emotion, God did not take it away. So sometimes God doesn't take it away so that when you share your story with somebody else, it still speaks at the same level and the same volume as when you first experienced it when you was young. All right. So moving on, my man Heman, he he's still at it with God. He's still going through it, yo. It says, thy fierce wrath goeth over me, thy terrors have cut me off. Thy came around about me daily like water. They compassed me about together. Lover and friend hast thou put far from me, and my acquaintance into darkness. Mm. In verse 16 and 17, Heman breaks down that he feels as though he's drowning in God's wrath and his terrors. In verse 1, in Genesis 1:1, we had mentioned this weeks ago. We talked about darkness was on the face of the deep, and the deep was the waters. And when the Bible mentions these waters, what it really is talking about that in the beginning, it was just the waves had no order to them. It's that the ocean was just the water was just crashing to each other. They created all these different waves and it was just chaotic. It was just a loud, chaotic disruption noise. And it was just water everywhere, nothing organized, nothing, it was just unstable. And he's saying that mentally, emotionally, spiritually, he's in a place where he feels this God's wrath has overtaken him. He compares it to that deep experience that's mentioned in the beginning in the creation. This is what he feels like. He feels overwhelmed. He feels chaotic. His mind is cluttered. It's everywhere. He's filled with emotion. He feels as though he's drowning in God's wrath. So why would God allow this to happen to him? He's been nothing but faithful. He's been nothing but he's shown God nothing but love. And still, God has him in a place where he feels as though he can't make it. And then in verse 18, he goes a little further and he says, my friends are nowhere to be found. Basically, that's what he's saying. My friends are nowhere to be found. Not only am I overwhelmed, not only am I in exile, not only have you taken me away from this place, my friends are nowhere to be found. To give you more context to the text, where some of the people he's talking about is his brother Ethan, who was also an Israelite, who was also chosen by David to be a praise and worship leader. Ethan is nowhere around. Where's Ethan? Ethan, my boy, my brother, my blood. Where is he? No one's around. None of the praise and worship leaders are around him. Nobody, everybody has abandoned him. God has literally separated him. God has isolated him. And he feels as though he's alone. So my next question, if you want to, you can throw it in the chat. I'm gonna definitely check it out. But what do you do when you are in a lonely, dark place? What do you do when you're in a lonely, dark place?
Shouldn't be waiting on me to answer. Lonely dark place. I mean, it could be a lot. Really, it depends on the day, the situation, the time. But just for the sake of argument, I mean, dark place. I guess the correct response would be to pray. That's not always the case. Sometimes that could be lashing out. I mean, I'm over 21. Sometimes that could be going to get a drink. Sometimes that could be, just kicking it with my friends, whatever the situation calls for. But what I've been trying to be intentional about is definitely like at least taking a step and breathing. Because I think people like kind of overemphasize prayer in the sense that you got to be on your hands and knees all the time. Sometimes I be driving down the road and I just be like, all right, God, let's do it. And for me, that's a quick prayer. You know what I'm saying? I think just me talking to God is prayer. So that's what I'm trying to get more intentional about when I see that dark place is either coming up or I'm in it. It's like let's try not to lean on the world. Let's try and lean on God.
Mm. So when you had, when you had the COVID, how was that experience for you?
It's called the vid. That's what it's called. I had the vid. But it was terrifying, the events that led up to it. I was very safe prior to that. I wasn't going nowhere. I worked from home, and it just so happened that the one weekend where I had pre-planned things to do, got tested and all that, and then I showed up positive. It was probably, if I had to say, quote unquote, the worst day of 2020, I was definitely that day. I was alone. I had to go by myself. Um, I was not in a foreign place, but I was in DC. I was in the city. I live in PG. So just even me having to make that drive back home was just a lot. I was hysterical when I found out because of the death rate, and they say if you're young or if you're fit, you're fine, but like it could hit anybody's body a certain way. Like I got it, and then 2 weeks later, my cousin got it, and he was on his deathbed. We have the same DNA, same blood, and you see we were on both ends of the scale. So it was a lot. I didn't know what to do, but it was in that moment where God was like, all right, do you trust me or not? That's really what it was. Like, it was like, do you trust me or not? Because you got quarantine for 14 or 10 to 14 days, like quarantine. I like my room, but you was like, you in the room, you in your room for 14 days. And, I was around Antoinette. Prior to that, I was terrified that I thought I gave her and the baby COVID. It was a lot. So, yeah, that was a difficult, 3 weeks for me to end out 2020.
Mm, mm. And it's crazy because basically, so we had to do so. Raven threw something out there that was deep. She said she prayed about it, but she also gave a shout out to Nina by saying sleep. Me and Nina had like a whole discussion on this sleeping in that space. But she really said something that stood out to me. She said she ride it out. She rides it out. Um, and I know Jordan, for you basically had to ride it out. I had the flu around the same time. You had to ride it out. So, Raven, real quick, what do you mean by ride it out?
I just mean that like sometimes, there are things that you need to do something to fix it. And then other times it's just a wave that's gonna pass after time. Like it's nothing you can really do to change it per se. You can try to change your mind about it, but even sometimes it's just I know for me, I'm usually in a pretty good mood. And so like when those times when I'm not in a good mood or not feeling great come by, sometimes it's just a reminder of myself that that's just a part of life at times. And, I'll just ride out this until I am back to my regular self. And again, it depends because sometimes you do need to do something to get yourself back to regular space. But sometimes it's just waiting it out and waiting for the moment to pass and then moving forward.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that that was actually good. That's why I told you what I told you, Raven. That was good. Being able to ride it out, um, because it also makes you tougher. When you ride out those moments, especially when you're by yourself, you get to really see how strong you are. You really get to see how strong you are. Um, and my sister Lysandra, she wrote, "I slow down, I take time, reflect." Can you break that down, sis? What you mean by that?
I think that our initial reaction, of course, as being very spiritual myself, is to pray. Of course, I'm going to pray, but a lot of times God, he takes that time, he reminds me, he says, excuse me, you have the strength, you have the mind to really get through this, and you know doggone well you're not alone. And so I say, well, you know what, you're right. Let me really think about this. And I think about why do I feel lonely? Why do I feel like I'm in a dark place? Maybe I'm not really in a dark place. What space am I really in? And I think that really taking that time to break it down, to realize like, am I really lonely? No, I'm not lonely. What am I? And I think when doing that, I realize where I'm actually at is not really in a dark place anymore. But I have to do the whole processing, and I have to slow down, not get so ahead of myself. Because at that point, if I'm saying I'm so dark and in a lonely place and feeling like God's not there, I'm being dramatic. So I have to really reel myself in, slow down, and process it to realize where I really am.
Ooh, that was good. 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 My favorite part when you said, "Am I really in a lonely place?" I'm gonna say that for another time. But the sleep thing, just to throw that out there. So what's also going on here is that him is saying that he's in a place where he tries sleeping. Um, he he ain't got nothing to eat because in those times in captivity, when they took you captive, they really want to feed you. You would starve. You would starve. And you were so anxious and so nervous about death, about them either killing you or you dying from starvation, that and also just dying from depression because you're separated from your family and your friends. Is that they're so you're isolated, and so you don't know if your enemies are going to kill you. You don't know if you're going to die from starvation. It's just so much going on where you can't sleep, you can't eat. It's just a lot of just nervous energy. And this is a place where human is crying out. He's crying to God that's like, yo, like where you at? I don't feel like I can make it. Um, and what he's doing is he's putting himself in a vulnerable place with God where he feels as though he's not going to make it. He's literally telling God, listen, I'm not going to make it. If only he had a Lysandra to tell him, are you really in a dark place? Um, it could have changed his perspective, And it's the reason why I mentioned that, but we'll get there next. So when we experience these dark spaces, many a times these are what we are experiencing. We're experiencing, like I said, the raging waters, which is the chaos, the roaring waves, which is the screaming, and the flood, which is being overwhelmed. I mentioned this, I think, in week 1 and week 2. Is that in these moments, so to break it down further, chaos is when your mind is completely cluttered, or you're in a physical place where there's so much going on that you can't focus. So this chaos is another way of saying unfocused. It's saying that there's so much going on up here that I can't concentrate on one thing. I got a million things going on. I got a million things going around me. My workspace looks junky. My school space looks junky. My room looks junky. My bathroom junky. My mind is junky. I got stuff everywhere. I can't focus. I'm losing it. It's that I'm losing it point. Is when nothing's in this right place. Mentally, physically, spiritually, you feel as though nothing's in this right place. It's chaotic. This is the space that the world was in before God gave it form, before God gave it order, before God gave it discipline. This is the space that your mind is in. It's in a chaotic place. The next one is the screaming. What that is just it can be literally screaming. It can literally be screaming. It can literally be a lot of noise going around you. But also it's a mental thing as well. It's an emotional thing as well. It's the crying out and you feel like no one hears you. It's that fire, that anger, that rage, and you feel like you just can't really let it out. So it's just bottled in, it's internal, and you're holding all of this thing. You're screaming within your soul, you're screaming within your mind, you're screaming within your body, and you just don't know how to let it out. And then you feel like if you do let it out, that you're going to just fall apart. And like Heman, you're going to feel like you're going to die. God, if I really let all this out, I'm done. This is that screaming, that internal thing or that external thing when you're just down for the count. And then the last one is the flood, when you just feel overwhelmed. When my mother used to say, I'm tired of being tired. This is that flood stage when you're overwhelmed, when you feel like God has literally broken his promise because he's put more on you than you can bear. God has placed a heavy burden on you. God has really just left you in a position or a situation where you cannot overcome this. So with these three stages, the raging waters or the roaring waves or the flood, just to reflect back on week one, I'm gonna throw it out there again. It's when you experience one of the three or all three or two out of three, what do you do in these moments? What do you do? Do you pray? Do you drink? Do you smoke? Do you go out there and fornicate? What do you do in these moments when you are faced with the deep? What do you do?
It depends, man. Depends on the day. Like I said, it really depends. Like I said before too, trying to be intentional with the prayer, but it doesn't always get to him as quick as it should. You know, it might take a week or two before I talk to God. I mean, it depends on the level that I'm in as well. You know, if you're in the deep, the raging waters, the roaring waves, or the flood, it really depends. But yeah, like I said, I try. I try. We all fall short of glory sometimes, but
All right, so I'm stay with you real quick. So you said that you try. So when you try in that process, which one are you normally experiencing? Is it the chaos, the screaming, or the just being overwhelmed? When you just, you know,
I mean, rare. I feel like rarely am I in roaring waves, and maybe I am and don't ever notice it. But I think the ones that I see, definitely the flood, overwhelm, and raging waters, chaos. It's a bunch of chaos, just be nonsense. But yeah, for sure.
what's up, Lysandra? You about to say something?
I was, but then I bit my sandwich and she was talking. Oh my God. I was gonna say, I release. I mean, as human beings, sometimes we gotta let those emotions out. You know what I'm saying? Those emotions aren't bad emotions. You know, if you need to scream or you need to cry, I mean, one of those that you mentioned, it just sounded like that time where you reach your breaking point. And I know, like, I might just sit there and cry. I ain't even gonna lie. I will cry. I will bawl and just, release it. Of course, again, I am a prayer, so I will pray. But sometimes you just gotta let it go. You gotta let the flood come, let the waves roar, whatever. You just gotta let it happen.
Nina said, I go to sleep and I listen to gospel.
That girl sleeps so much, she should never be tired. That girl always sleep.
She said,
Okay,
listen,
okay. Hold up. Wait.
Never
Calm
tired.
down. I ain't always sleep. Okay, but when I do sleep, I'll be asleep for a good time when I do sleep. Thank you very much.
and so
I think sometimes
go ahead.
I think sometimes me releasing those emotions though is me fighting through what I'm going through. Because if I don't, then, if I do go to sleep, I wake up and I still feel the same. I don't feel like it passed. I feel like I'm still overwhelmed by the chaos that's like all around me. That's why even sometimes I might exercise. Like I feel like I have to do something. Like that's how much what I'm going through is getting to me. Because at this point I feel surrounded. And if I do nothing, then I will lose it even more than I already lost it.
Okay. And so what's interesting about all your points is literally what I'm going to next is that so Heman in the text, if you read it, he's actually writing this after he done went through. So basically, he's saying that his method was crying. His method was crying. He prayed to God. He was crying. He was crying. He prayed to God. He's still crying. And now he went back and he wrote about his experience. This is what's going on. That he wrote about it after all it was said and done. He's still in exile when he writes this, but he wrote it in a place where he was no longer in that state where, well, he was still crying, but he wasn't in a state where he couldn't comprehend or couldn't write. So what I'm saying, so what that means, what it teaches us, besides being, some people are just holier than thou. Baby, you just pray. Baby, you're not praying enough. Baby, you're not praying enough. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes, so with God will give you different methods. What you have to ask yourself is that whatever method I use, will this be detrimental to me or others? As long as it doesn't cause harm to myself or others, then it's okay. It's okay. Of course, I need to cry out to God. Of course, I need to go to God. But if I need to cry, let me cry. If I need to scream, let me scream. If I need to exercise, let me exercise. If I just need to take a walk around the block, let me take a walk around the block. If I need to go drive just to free my mind, let me go drive. As long as I don't bring harm to somebody else or myself. Yeah, go ahead, Lysandra. What you about to say?
If Nina needs to sleep, then let her sleep.
Let her sleep. She said, okay, yeah, that's right, Jordan. Let me sleep. Oh man, that was good. That was good. Now the thing also with those other methods is that you can't escape what's inevitable. So during the deep, there the chaos, the screams, and being overwhelmed. When you use these different methods, it doesn't take away. It just replaces it for a certain amount of time. And so what Heman also teaches us is how to reflect during the process. Is that okay? I cried, but now God, I need you. And so what happens, Nina, just because everybody we picking on you, okay, I'm awake now, but the problem's still here. Okay, God. Okay, God. Jump in anytime. Tag you're it. It's a tag you're it moment. And what happens is it becomes that what Jordan said, it becomes a space where you gotta trust God. This is when it says, okay, when God says, okay, how much do you trust me? Do you really think I'm gonna leave you in a place where you feel as though you're just good as dead? Or do you see the light? Do you see that I can bring you out of this situation? I understand you done exercised, you done did 200 jumping jacks off of one situation. Your body looked better for it. But do you believe now, after you finish, that I can fix this? And going from that, we reach the point where we talk about the light. So with the light, John chapter 1, verses 4 and 5, it says, in him was the life, and the life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Then you drop down to chapter 8, verse 12. It says, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world, and whoever follows me will never walk into darkness, but will have the light of life. And so the question becomes, so why do I experience the darkness if I have Jesus? Why do I experience hard times if I have Jesus? Why do I go through these things if I have Jesus? If Jesus is the light of the world and Jesus has come down, he's taken away the remissions of sins, why am I still experiencing these things? And the truth of the matter is what my sister said, it's the illusion of darkness, is that the truth of the matter is we have these moments but God never really left you in a dark place. For some of us, that may not be something that everybody agrees with, but the truth is, God never left us, because the Bible says that He would never put more in us than we can bear. What God also says in His Word that is that I will never just let you die. As long as you stick with me, I will make sure. It doesn't say that you're not going to experience hard times, but He's not going to leave you. He literally says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And so when he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you, what he's telling you is that I'm not saying you're not gonna trip. I'm not saying you're not gonna stumble. I'm not saying you're not gonna cry, that you're not gonna get in a situation where you just want to sleep. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that when you awake, I want you to have enough faith in me to believe that I am the light, that I will not leave you based on your experiences. I'm still with you. That while you're asleep, I'm there. While you're exercising, I'm there. While you're taking your ride, I'm there. Whatever you're doing that's not going to harm you or anybody else, even when you're praying, I'm right there. It is this illusion that we have that when we feel as though nobody cares, and when we saying nobody, um, sometimes we even feel as though God doesn't care. Does God really love me? If God loved me, then why would this? If God really cared, then why this? If God really was there for me, then why this? And even while you're saying these things, God is right there saying, I never really left you in the dark. Even though you may believe you're by yourself, I never really let you go. I'm still here. Which goes to my final question, which my sister um, beat me to. She didn't even know it. Is am I really in the darkness? Am I really in the darkness? And so, trying to switch screens real quick. Oh, here we go. And so, when we get to this part right here, what am I really in the darkness? What God's trying to teach us in our journey, what He just wants to show us in our journey, is that sometimes when we get in these moments, we have to stop and reflect. Like my sister said, take your time and look at it. Is that, am I really in the darkness? You got to really ask yourself. Don't just, so what happens in these dark moments is that when you're in the dark moments, what do you reflect on? That is the key. For many of us that go through these issues, that have problems or ever face situations, is what do you reflect on? Because whatever you reflect on, this is what state is going to keep you in. So if I just reflect on, let's say me and a family member just got into a verbal altercation. If I reflect only on this verbal altercation, what happens is that stays constant. That stays constant. Not once in this moment that I try to reflect on God's love, reflect on God's peace, reflect on Jesus being the light. I only reflected on that point. So also in your reflection is, what do you reflect on? What grabs your attention? What holds you? What captivates you in your dark space? You know, meaning no offense. I gotta keep picking on you because everybody can't picking on you. Is that what dreams do you have while you sleep? You know, I remember I took a class at Greater, took a Bible study class, and I had mentioned that I sleep away my problems. And they said, but what do you think about when you sleep? I said, I don't know. And what the teacher was teaching is that when we fall asleep, that sometimes the last thing we watched, the last song we heard, or the last thought that we had tends to become our dream. It tends to be that thing that grabs our attention, because even though our body is asleep, our mind is still racing. And so we got to also reflect on the fact that before I fall asleep, before I do whatever, what am I reflecting? What's holding my attention? What's holding my attention? Um, so I caution you that when you reflect in these moments, reflect on good things. Don't just reflect on the problem, reflect on things that are positive, and try to stay upbeat as much as possible. And try to stay positive. And even when you think you're in a dark place, come to the realization that you're not really in a dark place. You're just in an illusion of the dark place. because the enemy wants you to feel defeated even when you are actually victorious. No pun intended, Victoria. So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Real quick, I had to throw one last question out there. Anybody can answer if you want. That if you had to give somebody advice who said, I'm in a dark space or I'm in a dark place, what advice would you give that person? What advice would you?
mean, I guess the first, it's a lot of things are easier said than done. That's why sometimes advice sucks. But if I had to give something, probably saying just, try and find the light, try and find your light through the light. So, whatever outlet you use, try and still see your way through it, because there's always another side. There's always a way out of the tunnel. Even though it might be a very long tunnel, a very dark, long tunnel, but there is a way out. And if God puts you in the tunnel, then there is a way for you to escape. So just try to keep pressing toward the light is probably what I say.
I like that. I like that. Sis, you got something? What's advice you would give somebody?
I wasn't on mute. I'm so sorry. What advice would I give? I'm not really an advice giver. I think I'm more of a question asker to kind of generate more thoughts. So if they would tell me like, hey, I'm in a dark place, maybe I would ask them what a light place looks like. Like, I see you're in a dark place. I'm not sure what a dark place looks like. I'm not really interested in what your dark place looks like. I want to know what your light place looks like. And then I'm going to ask you, well, how are you going to get to that light place? I'm not here to help you solve your I'm not here to solve your problems. I'm here to help you solve your problems.
Yo, why'd I just have flashbacks that your mom was just telling me something? What the heck? Yo,
I'm sorry, I'm so
crazy.
I'm sorry, I can't help it. I can't help it. I was born with it.
No, that definitely was me talking to my mom in her room. I'm just staring at her. I'm like, okay.
She said, what are you gonna do to fix it?
All right, Victoria, what advice would you give somebody?
I honestly don't know.
That's fine. You don't know, or it's like nothing comes to mind right now.
Both.
I get it. I get it. So for you, do you have to be in the moment with the person for that to, you know what I mean? Like, does it just boom, there it is?
Yeah, I really can't plan advice, if that makes sense.
Mm. Cool. I like that. I like that. So the reason why I asked that question though before we got off, because it's almost 4:30. I like ending at 4:30. The reason why I asked all y'all that question is because a couple of people who couldn't be on that wanted to be on, they had texted me this question, and I said I'm gonna leave it up to the group the next time we go on here for them to answer it, because that's why I'm also recording it so I can share it with others. Because sometimes it's good just to hear others' perspective on how they handle the dark place, and how they handle the dark place is how they're going to help somebody else handle the dark place. And so I really thank y'all for those responses, because y'all don't know that what y'all said in that moment, everybody who just shared something, you actually help somebody else who was actually wanting to be on here, who's going to see this recording, and who's going to take your words and really is going to help them out with whatever they're going through. And so thank everybody for tuning in. I don't know the next time I do another Bible study session. My pastor and I are talking about doing something later in the summer. I don't know. I still want to keep this same setup. I told him I like the small groups. It's more intimate. But we'll see see how it goes. Anybody know my pastor, know he's very energetic, so we don't know. But I am taking a break because baby girl should be on her way this weekend. So I'm definitely taking a break. And I'll be back probably during the summer, most likely. But thank everybody for tuning in. Because this is recorded, if you can, just share this with at least one person just to help them out. Just to help them out, because we never know what people are really going through and who's going through what in this time, But other than that, Jordan, I'm gonna see if you can. I want you to pray us out, and then and then we're gonna be good to go.
I'm glad my camera's on, so you saw me roll my eyes. All right. Father God, thank you for bringing us all here together. Thank you for giving Landle the wisdom and the courage to start a series like this and trying to inspire people, old, young, and in between. Thank you for allowing us to just hear a great word on a week-to-week basis. And even though, we're getting right now, that doesn't mean that we should be taking a break from you. So we should continue to study, learn, read, watching Sunday service, whatever that is, to stay tapped in and motivated through you and with your word. And just pray that as we all, go on our journeys and as we go through everyday life, everybody stays blessed, stays covered, stays safe. And you just continue to protect us, keep us, and watch over us, our families, and everyone we're attached to. I ask all of this in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thanks, everybody. Please keep us in your prayers as we get ready for baby girl this weekend. I love y'all. Y'all stay safe out there. All right.